Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Genius Pod. Today we're joined by Mrs. Regina Ip. So Mrs. Ip is currently a LegCo member, and she's also the convenor of the Executive Council, and she's also the former Secretary for Security. Welcome on the Genius Pod, Mrs. Ip.
Thank you. Thank you.
So before we start our video, be sure to follow us on Instagram and also check out our Google site. So, Mrs. Ip, we're going to start by talking about the Executive Council. So, how does the Executive Council work, and how is it different from LegCo?
Well, the functions of the Executive Council are provided in the Basic Law. You need to look up Articles 50, 54 to 56 of the Basic Law. It is basically an advisory body. Article 54 says, the Executive Council of the Hong Kong SAR shall be an organ for assisting the Chief Executive in policy making. So in a way, all ExCo members are the Chief Executive's advisors. Of course, under many Hong Kong laws, certain powers are given to Chief Executive in Council. Just like before 1997, those powers were exercised by the Governor in Council. The same arrangement has continued, such as under the Post-Secondary College Ordinance, Chapter 320 Laws of Hong Kong, the power to approve award of degrees by post-secondary colleges rests with the Chief Executive in Council. So collectively, CE in Council have some statutory powers, but individual ExCo members, including myself, basically are the Chief Executive's advisors. So you can say I'm the most senior advisor. But on the other hand, the LegCo, again, according to the Basic Law, Article 73, is a law-making body. If you look up Article 73, it gives 10, it lists 10 functions of the Legislative Council. But the primary functions are to make laws, make or repeal laws, approve, examine and approve budgets and other financial expenditure, raise questions on the work of the government, debate any public issues, endorse the appointment and removal of judges of the Court of Final Appeal and the Chief Judge of the High Court, etc. So basically the key difference is LegCo is a law-making body, and it's a body for vetting and approving the government's spending proposals, including the annual budget, whereas the Executive Council is the top advisory body.
All right, thank you. So, as you mentioned, you're also like convener of the Executive Council. So, obviously, recently we're in like 2022, almost at August. So, what do you aim to bring to Hong Kong in the next 5 years as the Executive Council?
Well, naturally, we want to help the Chief Executive to resolve, Hong Kong's problems. The most pressing ones include keeping COVID under control and reopening our borders to mainland China and to the rest of the world. The government is working hard on that. And then we need to resolve Hong Kong's acute land and housing shortage, other social economic problems. Hong Kong's economic growth is actually slow, positive but slow. Our economic structure is very narrow, and upward mobility for young people is not as good as in the old days, such as in my time when Hong Kong was growing very fast. So we need to do a lot, give a lot of advice to the Chief Executive to resolve these short-term and longer-term problems.
Okay, so we're going to talk about something which is also connected to the Executive Council, which is obviously the new configuration of the Hong Kong government. So recently, so first of all, how would you view the new configuration of the Hong Kong government?
The new appointments are, I think, very good. I think we have a very strong administration, the strongest team we have seen for many years. Of the 26 principal officials and political appointees announced, 16 are veteran civil servants of high quality. They come from the administrative grade, the discipline services and professional departments. The Secretary for Housing, Winnie Ho, is from the Architectural Services Department. The Secretary for Transport and Logistics, Lam Sai Hong, was Permanent Secretary, Works and Engineer. And then we have some high flyers, AOs who are high flyers appointed as bureau directors. And the others, we have incorporated others from professional streams like Professor Long Chong Mao, who is a very highly respected professional in the medical circle. And Professor Sun Dong is a tech professional, professor of City University. So, and we had Algernon Yao, formerly from Swire and Dragon Air, who knows the markets. So we have really good people, and I'm very pleased about it.
Okay. So in Xi Jinping's speech in Hong Kong, out of the very long speech, like in one part, I was well aware that he urged the new government to provide love and care to young people. How would you expect the new government to implement his words regarding young people?
I think the government needs to revamp the way it used to communicate with young people. The youth issues come under the schedule of Secretary for Home Affairs. But you might know in the old days what they did is to convene youth summits once every year and bring young people to the government secretariat. And the young people they brought were naturally those who were already on good terms with the government. So they were unable to reach out to young people who feel marginalized or who have doubts about the government. And particularly the young who lack upward mobility and are therefore frustrated or even angered at the government. So the chief executive has announced he will set up 4 task forces, one to deal with land and housing, one to deal with development, one to deal with local issues, and one to deal with ameliorating generational poverty, reaching out to young people and children who are truly disadvantaged. And the new Secretary for Home Affairs, Alice Mack, was an elected politician. She was a district councillor in Tingyi for a long time. So she knows, her circle is not limited to those who are well off. She understands the on-the-ground situation very well. So I think the new team and the new approach will help us to engage young people better, young people from a broader spectrum than before.
Okay, so obviously aside from like what you mentioned about some of the differences and the new changes to the government, what else can we expect? What differences can we expect from John Lee's administration to be different compared to Carrie Lam's?
I think he's been in office for about a month now, and the leadership styles is very different. I don't know whether you have noticed. John Lee puts a lot more emphasis on teamwork. Carrie likes to, work on her own. She has publicly said that she has no allies. That's not a good leadership style, in my opinion. And you notice from John's promotional video about his policy address consultation, he was seen with his sleeves rolled up, wearing just a shirt without a jacket, with the officials standing around him. He has succeeded in projecting the image that he is willing to listen and he believes in teamwork. And I think that's very important because no one person can solve all the problems in any society. You need to build a team. You need to be willing to take advice and put good people around you. And I think John is able to do that.
Okay, so let's rewind back to time, obviously back when you're Secretary for Security. So how's it like being Secretary for Security back at such a long period of time ago?
The atmospherics was very different, and um, well, I did pull up a few important achievements. For example, um, I was able to achieve secure for Hong Kong visa-free access for the European Union for the Hong Kong SAR passports. That was a tremendous breakthrough because the SAR passport was new at that time. And after we secured visa-free access for EU, Japan gave us visa-free access. Now, I think the Hong Kong SAR passport holder can enjoy visa-free access to something like 170 countries, which is quite an achievement. And of course, I failed to implement the Article 23 national security legislation. The draft that I championed was actually very mild. And by the time the mass protest took place, the ExCo Bills Committee already completed scrutiny of the bill. We were ready to go back to ExCo for resumption of second reading. I think there was nothing wrong with the provisions in the draft bill at all. I think the government lost the PR war. We were not sufficiently politically savvy at that time to counter all the negative vibrations, all the demonization of the national security bill. I think I certainly was not sufficiently politically experienced at that time. So that was the major inadequacy. Otherwise, I think I did a good job.
Okay, so to follow up, obviously, as you mentioned, the article, like your concept was pretty fine, but then you guys lost the PR war. So if you're able to head back to time, what would you do differently?
I would have been much more careful in public speaking, much more careful in not making remarks could be twisted against me, give away sound bites that could be used against me. You might have noticed that it's much harder for people to find fault with my public comments these days because I have learned my lessons. And we need to, at that time, I had a very small team. It was purely a security bureau effort. It was not the whole of the government effort to promote national security bill. So there was not enough teamwork at that time. In fact, we were very short of resources. The rest of government did not come forward to support me as much as they are supporting each other these days. So when you handle something potentially controversial, the government as a whole needs to build a stronger team and put forward a whole of the government approach. I had very limited PR marketing resources, and I was unable to counter all the negative vibrations about the bill that I put forward. Actually, I try my best to explain the provisions to many sectors. I attended personally meetings with student unions in 5 universities in spite of their booing and in spite of the insults hurled at me, but I did my best to engage. But in hindsight, the PR campaign should have been better run, in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay,
But there
so
was something wrong with the timing. The timing was unfortunate in that it coincided with the SARS epidemic and a sharp downturn of property values. So there was a lot of anger in society, and Article 23 became the lightning rod for public anger.
okay, so we're gonna switch gears to something quite similar with with overall law. So we'll be talking about Hong Kong's what I think is a special unique judicial system, which is having overseas non-permanent judges. So obviously, why do you think it was a great idea, like someone had the idea of having non-permanent judges in Hong Kong? Because at the end, it's not a common practice in overseas?
Well, it's in the basic law, that was agreed in the run-up to signing the Sino-British Joint Declaration that we could employ overseas experts. Only certain positions are limited to Chinese nationals without right of abode outside Hong Kong. Only a small number of jobs, principal officials, ExCo members, the top judges. Both the Sino-British Joint Declaration and the Basic Law provide for overseas experts who serve in Hong Kong government as part of our unique advantage, as part of our unique international linkages, which ought to be preserved. That's number one. Point number two is it is in the interest of Hong Kong to have highly respected overseas jurists serving in our top courts. I don't know whether you've read some of the judgments. Some of the most important landmark judgments made by the Court of Final Appeal include rulings made by top overseas judge. For example, the judgment on Ding Quan, I don't know whether you know about that, the small house policy, New Territories, indigenous people's rights to a small house, under article was challenged under Article 40 of the Basic Law. Does that fall within the traditional rights of the New Territories, indigenous people, which ought to be protected? That was challenged, and that was fought all the way to the Court of Final Appeal. That right to a small house only by male indigenous residents, not female, not urban residents, is no doubt discriminatory. It's discriminatory. But the Court of Final Appeal judges, including Lord Sumption from UK, retired Supreme Court judge, said that the Basic Law overrides these non-discrimination provisions. And that's very authoritative. The judgment is very well written. You should read it. These overseas judges have contributed enormously to clarifying the law on what is discrimination, what is the constitutional relationship between the National People's Congress Standing Committee and our courts, what is the status of the Basic Law, how do you interpret Articles 158 of the Basic Law. They make tremendous contributions, and they are highly respected overseas. So I think we are very fortunate to have that. I think we continue to have about 10 in our top courts, despite the resignation of 2 serving UK Supreme Court judges.
Okay, so obviously, as you mentioned before, you're like having overseas non-permanent judges is a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah, but then here's what I saw in the news, like I think a few months ago, was that one of the judges, Robert Reed, which is actually quit from being overseas non-permanent judge, because he was obviously worried about the national security law, his concerns. And I've noticed that during the period when he was serving as our overseas non-permanent judge, he was also allowed to serve as president of the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. So, which can obviously lead to somewhat of an interest conflict, as he works both for the UK and the Hong Kong governments at the same time. So, what are your opinions and comments on
there are
this?
2 issues here. 2 issues. Number one, is it right to have a serving judge of a foreign court to have on our Court of Final Appeal? Many people have some doubts about it, but remember, judges are supposed to judge independently in accordance with legal principles, irrespective of whether they are serving judge of Canada or Britain or Australia's Supreme Court. But it may be better not to hire serving judges. I think retired judges are better. The second point is, being serving judges, they are subject to the directions of their Justice Secretary. So they were actually asked to resign, to leave by their government. They left after the government. The statement from UK government clearly indicates that the UK government want them to withdraw from our court, and they did. But the other retired judges, Lord Sumption, Lord Hoffman, they were unintimidated. They could do whatever they like, and they have said they will serve on, including her Honor Beverly McLachlan, former Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada. She said publicly that she never felt there was any pressure on her or any interference with the way she exercised her judicial power independently.
Okay, so we're gonna start summarizing.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna start talking about the Executive Council and Hong Kong government, just to follow the order. So overall, what are your comments and views of the new Executive Council and new Hong Kong government? I know this is a bit of a repeat, but we can start to summarize it a bit for the viewers.
Well, I think the new government, the administration, including the Executive Council, and of course the administration, the executive, they are the people who really get things done. We are the advisors, but collectively, I think we got off to a good start. The government, the new administration under the leadership of John Lee is perceived, people agree, it is more proactive. It responds much more quickly. It is more willing to take advice, and it has made a good start in helping reopen our borders with the rest of the world. Shortly after Professor Low Chongmou took over, the government abolished the flight ban, and then the government introduced electronic declaration for those arriving from overseas, and is upgrading the system today as from yesterday, putting it on trial. In future, everybody will do electronic declaration before boarding the plane, which will reduce the waiting time at the airport, making it more convenient for them to travel. And the government has talked about introducing red and yellow health codes to minimize the time required for quarantine. So all moving in the right direction in only about a month's time. So this government is truly demonstrating its results-oriented approach. So I think the general feedback is really quite good. In some, it has got off to a good start.
All right, so we're going to talk about our summary for the judicial system. So overall, what are your comments on the judicial system?
I think our judicial system, judicial independence is intact. Our rule of law remains highly robust. The power to prosecute and the power to adjudicate are all exercised independently in accordance with legal principles. There is no question of any political interference. And after the enactment of the National Security Law by Beijing, last year, the World Justice Project continued to rank Hong Kong 19th in its rule of law index. I think we are 7 places above the US. So our standing remains good.
All right, so thank you very much for joining me, Mrs. Ip. It's obviously been a pleasure to have you on the Genius Pod. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so okay, but be sure to follow us on Instagram. Check out our Google sites for easier access to other episodes. And until next time, see you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.